and Schwartz opening office in Pacific Beach, and you had just met Charlene Monte Green. Was that, did you guys date a long time? What was your impression of?
No, me. But the courtship lasted like 3 months. I mean, this is a total gamble. This is like saying I'm going to roll a 7 or something. Anyway, but
You'd met her parents and...
yes. In fact, more ways than one. I'd met them in their living room.
Mm.
And then one weekend when I was sailing in this little boat I had, this yacht was coming through under the bridge, and I sailed right in front of them. And so later when I had a date with her, her dad said, you know, we were on our boat, our yacht, and this boat sailed right in front of me, and it was me. So I felt a little guilty, but I did tell me that was the one.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to take precedence over any power boat. So anyway...
how long were you engaged for?
Well, I guess when we set the engagement, it was up at Warner Springs. We had champagne, and it was going to be in June, because June is when people get married. So I was probably 2 or 3 months ahead of time. We decided on June.
Where were you living?
In an apartment on Pacific Beach Drive in Pacific Beach, and it was $75 a month. It was a 1-bedroom, very small, very small. In fact, Charlene's wedding gowns, I don't mean her wedding gown, but there's something else, a trousseau or something they call. She had all these flared type dresses, like ballet flared, and they took up the whole room of our bedroom. You had to go through whatever that material is made of just to find the bed. It was huge. And so anyway.
Where was she living before you?
Well, she was on Hart Drive in Kensington.
So this is after she had finished school at USC and she was teaching?
Well, she started teaching after we met, I think. But she just completed her studies for certificate to teach. And
the wedding was at what church? In
St. James by the Sea, Episcopal Church. And Father Walter Storff was the minister. And he counseled us, suggested that we consult with him, I don't know, months to maybe a year after our marriage in case we were having trouble. But we never consulted him.
Whose idea was it for the reception at the La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club? I mean, it's kind of a ways away from where you were living in PB Drive and Hart Drive. They were kind of more in Old San Diego. And
well, I'm not really sure who made that decision, but it was, I think it was controlled mostly by Charlene's mother, and Ed Green consented to evidently spend a lot of money to put on this reception, because the good champagne, flowed so heavily that one of the waitresses that I grew to know later, and others I'm sure, walked off with a whole bottle of champagne. We spent most of the reception shaking hands because so many people were there.
Did, after you were together, obviously a 1-bedroom apartment on PB Drive is not going to cut it very long. It was from there you moved down to the Mission Bay?
Well, on some time off, I decided to take a walk down Mission Boulevard, where there are tons of little houses and apartments and condos. And way down at the end of Mission Boulevard, in an area called the Jetty. It's where the Pacific goes into Mission Bay. There were some sand lots, some empty lots. And I saw this house with a broken down roof, shingles, and someone along the street, they told me that was where the man lived that owned these lots. And so I knocked on his door, and he had candlelight on the table and a girlfriend there. His name, I recall, is George Stiles. George Stiles. I learned later he was a Cadillac salesman. And he said, he admitted he owned these lots. No, I don't have anything for sale. So I said, okay, well, thank you for your time. And then I gave him a card, and I said, if for any reason you should change your mind or want to sell one of these lots, you could call this number. And the number was 488, and it had another 3 8s in there somewhere. And I left it with him, and when I got back to the apartment on Pacific Beach Drive, the phone was ringing. He said, "You're interested in a lot?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come back, I'll show you something." So I drove back down to the end of Mission Boulevard, and he said, "Follow me." And I went out, and he showed the back of his Cadillac, and the license plate had 888 on it. And he said, "I believe in numerology. When I looked on your card, you had 888 in your phone number, so I think I should sell you one of these lots." And I said, "Okay." He said, I guess he was still drunk from when I saw him earlier. He said, $3,888.88. I said, that sounds fine. And so these lots are quite small. They're 30 feet in width and 80 feet deep. So 30 by 80, it's a pretty small area. I didn't have much money. I talked to my mother. That's the only other relative I had at that time, unless my in-laws. And she said, "Well, I think it should be a very upfront business proposition, because emotions get into it if you just say, 'Oh, here's some money, pay me back,' because often people don't get paid back." And she was living mostly on her Social Security. So we went to a bank, and the bank was responsible for collecting the money, and we had to pay. I paid the interest, so I borrowed enough money to buy that lot. And once you own the lot, then you have something to apothecate for a builder. And I located a builder, and so he built this house that was built more like a submarine. We had rooms kind of fitting together so that it was like a jigsaw puzzle.
Do you remember the address?
Yeah, 818 Anacapa Court. Anacapa.
This is a picture from, I think, pretty early on when you made a trip back east.
Yeah. Yeah, this was Charlene's first pregnancy, and my Aunt Emma, with whom I had lived with my Uncle Charlie, had never met Charlene. So Charlene and I, and at that time my mother had been the receptionist in my office. So anyway, Charlene and I and my mother went back to Winston-Salem to introduce my wife to my aunt. That's that. Okay. So we drove the southern route across the country,
How long did you take for this trip? Were you planning on the drive? You weren't going to go straight through. You were going to make a few stops and.
Make as few stops as I think we made 2, perhaps 3 on the way. But from North Carolina, we kind of made a U down south through Georgia and across through Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and we were on the highway up between Arkansas and Texas. It was 5 in the evening, and there was a little rise in the highway, and I couldn't see over the rise what was on the other side, and I was going about 80 miles an hour, and when we got up to the top of this rise, right in front of me was a road grader, a road scraper that was making a U-turn in the highway. This was a federal highway. It should have been kept clear, but anyway, I had a strange feeling like this is it, and pins and needles were, I think, the results of adrenaline rush, and I had to make a decision of what to do other than just pile straight into this massive steel. There was a shoulder to the road, although I didn't look to say, is there a shoulder? Is shoulder or not? I knew I had to leave the road. So as it happened, there was a shoulder, and so I went down the shoulder, which was a grassy shoulder, and into this lady's front yard, ran over a tree, and brought the car to a stop. And she was on the porch rocking, but she stopped rocking for a minute. But I got out of the car rapidly, went around the car. There was no damage. The rear bumper had dug some dirt and sawed out from her lawn, but I didn't say I'll make it good. I just got back in the car and took off, and my female passengers, namely my mother and my wife, said, why don't you, tell that man off. He shouldn't have been doing this. There was no more warning, no things laid out to say there's some construction ahead. None of the warnings you see in most places. But I didn't feel like fighting with him because it was all over.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went on. That's the story of that.
So you made this trip back to North Carolina after settling in San Diego, and previous to this, there were no relatives from your side of the family residing on the West Coast. But now, is it correct to say, as a result of you coming out, that your mother and then your sister came out also? Is that correct?
Yes. After my mother came out, my sister, who at this point was married to James Mankin, and James Mankin was practicing in a little town called Lincolnton, North Carolina, and I won't go into the details except he was looking maybe to go somewhere else, and so he had made contact with this doctor in the South Bay area, and at that time, even though my sister had an MD degree, she was not practicing at that time. She had, at that time, at least 2 children, I think 3 children actually, so she was a stay-at-home mom for a while. So when they came out, they did come out to California, and he did start practice in the South Bay area.
Did she start practicing also later?
Yes, later then she started practicing too. As her children grew older, they were more self-sufficient. Plus the fact she had my mother with her who could do babysitting. So the house that they bought, they built a little house attached to it with a Murphy bed that would fold up, just one big bedroom more of it. And so my mother lived in that, but she could very easily take care of the girls, my sister's children, where she lived there. So that was the way that was arranged.
And you had kids of your own. These are the 3 pictures I found that I'm probably going to
Yeah, okay.
put in there just
Well,
to get the...
We started having children a year after we were married.
You were married in 56?
56. So in 57, we had Lisa, and then the next child was Bill, and that was in 59. And then after that, in 61, we had Kristen. And then finally, after 7 years, we had Scott.
Your practice developed? Were you able to, I mean, obviously all the work up to this, you have not a lot of free time, but as you started to get more free time, you were back into your hobbies of building models and actually started flying, picking up flying lessons again, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Part of the fact that I started doing things other than just medicine, some people get totally immersed in doing their medicine. And others, like myself, I had a lot of interest, so many interests.
Which hospital are you practicing out of initially?
Initially, I had privileges at Grossmont because I was out at La Mesa, and Grossmont Hospital was there. And then I got privileges at Mercy Hospital, and Sharp Hospital was just, their OB was on the 4th floor of the main building. This is before they built the so-called Stork Club. And I had scattered privileges all around the city, including the South Bay area where my sister and brother-in-law lived. And then I had privileges at Scripps.
And this is when Scripps was located down in the village?
Down on the ocean, right next to the Scripps Clinic, which had no surgery, no OB. It was a research institution. So
your practice is developing, but you are also able to...
yeah, I don't know exactly what reawakened my interest in flying, but
I found that. I remember I was thinking out at Gillespie at, was it Breeze Johnson?
yeah, this particular plane was, maybe it was at Breeze Johnson, but very soon I had transferred it to Montgomery, where National Air College had a place to tie down, and it was a plane that was leased out to people to help to make it financially feasible to have a plane, is to have somebody help pay for it.
Did you talk to your wife before you got the airplane or started flying?
Yeah, I don't think she was in favor of it.
And she wasn't one to go flying with you much either, was she?
No, I think I got her in the plane maybe twice. But the last time was it. I was going to go east, and when I got over the mountains, it was a little bumpy, and so she ended up looking at the ceiling. And also, time before that, we'd had another couple with us. This was a Cherokee 180, which could carry 2 people. And a couple in our back seat of the plane. The girl, her name was Sid Youngson, she had flown a Mooney Mite, who, her uncle was a manufacturer of these Mooney airplanes. She had flown one from Kansas out to the West Coast. So she was a pilot, and she was in the back seat of the plane, and we were coming back to San Diego from a trip. And I had a tendency sometimes to not have that reserve fuel that you're supposed to have to fly to an alternate field. So I'll admit that the fuel gauge showed we were getting pretty low. And Sid Youngson looked from the back seat to the front and said, yeah, it's getting a little low. And that just set off Charlene she started screaming, do something. And I had a few curse words because she was almost hysterical. And I, in my mind, was planning what I would do if the plane quit. I was over water. Should I stay low, or should I, with the few drops left, climb high, and then I could glide in on a dead stick to a field? I knew where the fields were. So she claimed she could see the fish jumping, but you know how people exaggerate. So I decided to climb, and I climbed up enough to probably glide 5 miles or so. So anyway, we came in and landed at Gillespie and took out a stick to see how much fuel I really had left. And the wings have a dihedral, so the stick was hitting nothing on the outside of the tank, but as you get down to the root of the wing, there was still a little gasoline there.
So the engine didn't quit.
It didn't quit.